For 5 years since Margaret passed, my old friend Thomas had been lost in the quiet that followed. We had not met in many years. I knew that small house in Ohio where he lived all alone. The streets were clean there, the trees tall, and the air cool. I pictured his simple house, its 2 rooms, and the porch where he sat. He'd lived there for 3 decades. Now he was the sole occupant. His wife was a kind, funny woman, full of life. They used to share their evenings with tea and conversation about their day. When she died, the house itself changed for him. I knew it looked the same, but it had to feel different. The structure was still sound. His bed was likely still soft. But the silence must have been deafening. Her voice was gone. Her laugh was gone. And I knew nothing could fill that void. Thomas probably kept his old routine. I bet he rose at 6, even with nowhere to go. He would make coffee and sit on the porch, watching the sun and listening to birds. Neighbors might walk past with dogs. Cars would pass, but no one would stop to talk. He'd just sit, watch, and think. He was a history teacher at the middle school once. He had a passion for telling stories of America's past, about freedom, and about strong people. His old students really liked him. They told me he made history feel alive. He gave that school 35 years. On his retirement, they gave him a clock. He put it in his living room, probably ticked slowly now as if it had also aged. His daughter, Emily, lived far away in New York. She was a nurse with a husband and 2 little boys. She'd call him on Sundays, but I gathered the calls were brief. "Hi, Dad. How are you?" Followed by talk of loud kids and promises to talk next week. Thomas always said he loved them and to take care. Sometimes the call would end before he could even finish his sentence. Afterward, he would be alone once more. That evening I wrote the letter. I pictured him opening a drawer and finding an old photo album. I could see him wiping off the dust, his hands turning the pages full of a past life. His wedding day, their first car, their baby Emily, family trips, holiday dinners. Each picture held a memory. I imagined him touching a photo of Margaret smiling by a tree. A tear might have fallen from his eye. He probably wouldn't wipe it away. He would sit by the window and watch the sky turn orange as the sun went down. He might have asked himself what was left. Old photos, a quiet house, and waiting for short Sunday calls. I wanted my letter to catch his eye. A plain white envelope on his table. It was from me, Jack, his old friend in California. We had not seen each other in years. I hoped he'd open it slowly and read my words. I wrote, "Dear Thomas, it's been a long time. I hope you're doing okay." I described our new life, a small town near the ocean. The weather here is nice. I told him I walk on the beach each morning. It's so peaceful. We have a guest room. You should come stay with us for a bit. We could talk and laugh and recall old times. I asked him to think about it. It would be good for you. I signed it, "Your old friend, Jack." After he read it, I hoped he would pause and think. Maybe stand and walk to his window. I hoped he'd feel the soft wind and notice the quiet street. But inside his heart, I wished something would change. He wouldn't feel happy, not right away. But he might not feel so lost either. I wanted him to look at the sky and whisper that maybe it wasn't too late. That maybe he had something left to do. That this quiet house was not the end of his story. When he went to bed that night, I prayed my letter was still in his hand. For the first time in weeks, he might feel something new. Not joy, not fear. Something gentle. Something like hope. And he might sleep through the whole night without waking. Outside his window, the moon would be full, the stars shining. A second journey was not yet started, but it was waiting. A few weeks later, he called and said he was coming. I stood at the bus station with my old brown suitcase in my mind. He had packed only what was needed, some clothes, his photo album, and my letter. I looked around. The station was busy. People were talking on their phones or eating snacks. Children laughed while pulling their little bags. Then I saw him, standing quietly, holding a ticket in his hand. A one-way ticket to California. He hadn't traveled in so long. His last trip was with Margaret. They visited Chicago for their 30th anniversary. That trip must have been full of joy and love. This one would feel different. He was likely nervous, but also a little excited. His heart beating faster, not from fear, but from the prospect of change. The bus arrived, big, white, and clean. Thomas stepped on slowly and found a seat beside the window. As the bus started moving, he looked at his town one last time. The small store, the park where Emily played, the coffee shop he and Margaret frequented on Sundays. It all passed like pages in a storybook. He told me he did not cry. He just watched, feeling grateful for the life he'd had and curious about what was ahead. Hours passed. Trees, roads, rivers, cities went by. At one stop, a young man named Leo sat with him. He was 25 and heading to Los Angeles to be a musician. He had on headphones and carried a guitar. At first, they were silent, but then Leo removed his headphones and smiled. "Going far, sir?" he'd asked. "Yes," Thomas said. "Cal?" The young man seemed pleased. "Nice. I'm going there too." "First time?" "Yes," he'd replied. "First time alone." Leo nodded and told him that sometimes that's the best way to travel. They talked more. Thomas told him about teaching, about his dear Margaret, and about my letter. Leo listened respectfully. He'd said, "That's beautiful. Most people wait too long to live again." Thomas looked out the window and that line stuck with him. To live again. It stayed in his thoughts. When their bus stopped for a meal, Leo helped Thomas with his bag. They ate a burger and fries together. Thomas had not eaten fast food in years, but he said it tasted good. Not due to the food, but because he was not eating by himself. The journey lasted 2 days. When they arrived in California, the sky was bright and the air was quite warm. Palm trees stood tall on the roadside. Thomas stepped off the bus and looked around. The world felt different, he said. Not better, not worse, just new. I was waiting near the station in my old blue car. I waved with both hands and laughed. "Thomas!" I shouted. "You look the same." He smiled and walked over, slow but steady. I hugged him tight. I said, "I'm glad you came, old friend." He didn't say very much, but his eyes said it all. This was not simply a visit. This was a beginning. The road behind him was long, but now a new one had begun, and Thomas was ready to walk it. The road from the bus station to my house was calm and full of light. The sun was warm, not hot. The sky was blue, and the air had a scent of salt and trees. As I drove, I told him about our town. "It's quiet here," I said. "People know each other. We don't have big buildings, but we have peace." He listened and nodded. He seemed to like that word, peace. We drove past small houses with flowers in their yards. Kids played on bikes. Old men sat outside shops and talked. Some people waved when they saw my car. I waved back with a big smile. "That's Claire. She owns the bakery," I told him. "And that man with the hat, that's Mr. Ben, our barber for 20 years. Everything felt simple here, like time moved slower and softer. My house is near the ocean, small, white, and has a red roof. From the porch, you can see the beach. The waves come and go like music. There's a garden with chairs and a tree with yellow fruit in the back. My wife, Linda, came out to welcome him. She has kind eyes and a soft voice. "We're happy to have you here," she said. "You can stay as long as you want. Your room is ready." Inside, the house smelled of lemon and old wood. The furniture is simple but warm. There are books on shelves and pictures on the walls. Thomas looked safe. He sat on the couch and looked around. It was not his house, but it felt like a home. Linda brought him some tea and cookies. We talked until the sky turned orange. That night, I saw him on the porch alone. The ocean moved in the distance. He could hear it and smell it. The wind touched his face like a gentle hand. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in so long, his chest didn't feel heavy. His heart didn't seem empty. Something inside him had opened. The next morning, I said, "Let's go for a walk." We walked slowly through town. Everyone greeted us. "Good morning, Jack." "Hello, sir." Some people asked Thomas if he was new. He smiled and said, "Just visiting for now." We stopped at a small cafe. A young woman named Maya brought us coffee. She was friendly and fast. She asked him, "What do you do?" He said, "I was a teacher." He taught history. Her eyes lit up. "My little brother hates history." She laughed. "Maybe you can teach him one day." He smiled. Something inside him moved again. In the afternoon, I showed him the community center. "People gather here," I said. "We talk, we read, sometimes we help kids with schoolwork. You're welcome to come." He looked inside. There were tables, books, drawings, and some children playing. It felt warm, alive, real. One of the boys ran to him. "Are you a new teacher?" he asked. Thomas laughed. "Maybe," he said. "Are you a good student?" The boy smiled wide and ran away. I looked at Thomas and said, "They could use someone like you here." That evening, after dinner, he sat alone again. He looked at the stars and thought deeply. He was not young. He had lived most of his life. But something new was growing in him. He didn't want to just sit and remember. He wanted to speak again, teach again, feel useful again. He took out some paper and wrote something. He told me it said, "This is not retirement. This is my return." He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. The waves kept coming and going. The wind was soft. The stars were quiet. But inside Thomas, a fire had started, small but steady. One morning Thomas sat near the window in his new room. The sunlight touched the wall softly. The ocean breeze came through the curtains. He was holding an old photo. It was Margaret standing by a tree, smiling. Her eyes were bright and her hands were full of flowers. I saw him touch the photo with such care, as if it could speak. That picture was not just paper. It was a piece of his heart. He sat there quietly, and I knew he was thinking about his past. His years as a teacher were full of stories, not just from history books, but stories from life. He told me about one student named James who was always angry and never listened. But Thomas never raised his voice. One day, he gave James a book about Abraham Lincoln. The next week, James arrived to class early. He asked, "Sir, how did Lincoln keep going when he lost so much?" Thomas had smiled that day and said, "Because he believed in something bigger than pain." That moment stayed with him. Teaching for him was never just a job. It was love, patience, and hope. Then his thoughts would turn to his wife. Margaret wasn't just his partner. She was his world. She understood his silence. She made him tea when he was tired. She danced in the kitchen when it rained. She would tell him, "We only get one life. Let's live all of it." After she died, everything changed. The house was the same. The bed, the books, the cups stayed the same. But nothing felt alive. Every room was filled with memory but empty of feeling. He had stopped laughing. He stopped talking much. His heart became quiet, like a house without any light. He missed the small things, her voice in the morning, the way she would fold clothes, the smell of her hair, the way she touched his hand without saying a word. These were not huge memories, but they were the ones that hurt the most. He had kept all of her letters. He'd never had the courage to open them. But now, in our house, he felt strong enough. He opened his suitcase and took out a small wooden box. Inside were 5 letters. They were old but safe. He opened the first. Her handwriting was soft and round. She had written it on their 25th wedding anniversary. She wrote, "My dear Thomas, thank you for being my quiet strength. You don't speak much, but I always feel your heart. You are the reason I believe in gentle love. If I ever leave this world before you, please keep living. Don't stop walking. Don't stop teaching. The world needs you, even when you feel tired." It was signed, "Your Margaret." His hands shook, and his eyes filled with tears. He pressed the letter close to his chest. He whispered, "I didn't keep walking, Margaret, but maybe now I will." Later that day, I knocked on the door. "Some kids are asking about you," I said with a smile. "Want to come?" He wiped his face and nodded. "Yes," he said. "I think I'm ready." He walked with me to the community center. The children were drawing maps. One child said, "Sir, can you help me find Italy?" Thomas sat beside him. His hand slowly pointed at the globe. He smiled. The boy smiled back. At that moment, I could see he felt something strong inside him. His past was not a heavy chain. It was a garden. His love, his teaching, his loss. None of it was wasted. It had shaped him. Now he could share it again. Not through pain, but through purpose. That night, he didn't open his photo album. He didn't need to. The past was still there, but it no longer hurt the same way. It had changed into strength, into stories, into something he could give. I saw him look at the stars and say softly, "Margaret, I'm not alone anymore. Your love is still here, and now I'll carry it forward. One child, one story, one step at a time." The waves moved behind him. The wind blew gently. Thomas sat still, but inside him a whole new life had begun to move. The sun was warm that day. A gentle wind came from the ocean. The community center was busy. Chairs were being placed in rows. Children were running, laughing, and drawing on the floor with chalk. Parents stood talking. Some people brought snacks and juice. The room smelled of paper, cookies, and hope. A small whiteboard stood at the front. On it was written in blue marker, "Story Evening, Guest Speaker, Mr. Thomas." At first, Thomas had said no. "I haven't spoken to a group in years," he told me. But I had smiled and said, "You don't have to perform. Just tell one story from the heart." Linda had added, "You have a voice that brings peace. Share it." So he had agreed, but his hands still shook as he held his notes. When he entered the room, many people clapped. He looked a little nervous, but also a little proud. He wore a clean shirt, old but ironed, and his favorite brown shoes. As he walked to the front, the children sat quietly. Some looked curious, some whispered to each other, but all eyes turned to him when he began to speak. He didn't look at the paper. He didn't need it. He began softly. My name is Thomas. I was a teacher for 35 years. I taught history, but I stopped teaching 5 years ago when I lost someone very special. There was silence. He looked at the people. Some adults nodded slowly. They understood loss. They felt it in their own ways. He continued, My wife Margaret was my best friend. She was full of light. After she passed, I forgot how to smile. I forgot how to speak. I lived in a house full of photos and memories, but not people, not laughter. The children listened. Even the smallest ones were quiet. He took a deep breath and said, Then one day I got a letter from a friend. He asked me to come here to rest, to start again. I came without knowing what I would find. He looked at the back of the room and saw Linda and me. We stood still, smiling, our eyes soft. Thomas smiled too. I found waves. I found warm faces. I found a child who asked me, Are you a teacher? And in that moment, I realized, yes, I still am. He took a pause. The room was quiet, but not cold. It was the quiet of deep listening. I came here carrying pain, but now I carry stories. I carry memories. I carry love that never left me. It was just waiting to be shared again. He turned to the children and said, Never forget this. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And one day, your words will help someone rise again. The room clapped, not loud, but full of heart. Some people stood. One old man wiped his eyes. A little girl came and hugged Thomas. She said, That was beautiful. After the event, many people came to talk to him. Some shared their own stories. One woman said, I lost my husband last year. You gave me hope tonight. Another man said, My son hated school. Maybe you can talk to him sometime. Thomas listened to each voice. He gave time. He gave warmth. That night he walked home with me. The stars were bright. The ocean was quiet. You were amazing, I said. He laughed softly. I didn't expect to feel this way again. I looked at him. That's the magic of second journeys. They don't take you back. They take you forward. Thomas nodded. He looked up at the stars and I knew in his heart he whispered, Thank you, Margaret. I'm alive again. After the story evening, something shifted in Thomas's days. People started to greet him more. Strangers smiled. Children waved. A boy at the bakery said, Hi, Mr. Thomas. The girl from the cafe brought him coffee and said, That speech made my grandma cry. She loved it. Everywhere he went, people saw him not as an old man, but as someone with something to give. One morning, I got a phone call from the school principal, Mrs. Lang. She said, We heard Mr. Thomas speak last week. Would he be willing to visit our school just for one class? I asked him that evening and he said, Yes, but only if the kids really wanted to listen. I laughed and said, They do. They're excited. So the next Monday, Thomas walked into a classroom for the first time in 5 years. The school smelled of fresh paper and wood floors. Children's drawings hung on the walls. He stood at the door for a moment. His heart beat fast. He saw a group of 12-year-olds staring at him, curious and excited. Mrs. Lang said, Class, this is Mr. Thomas. He's going to talk to us about courage. He walked to the board and turned around slowly. The room was silent. He smiled and began. Long ago, there was a man named Martin Luther King Jr. He did not fight with fists. He fought with words. He changed the world because he believed in peace. That is courage. The students leaned forward. Their eyes followed every word. Some took notes. Some just listened deeply. He didn't speak loudly, but his voice filled the room. He spoke about Abraham Lincoln. He spoke about Rosa Parks. He told them about people who stood up when the world wanted them to sit down. When he finished, the class clapped. One boy raised his hand and said, "Sir, can you come again?" Thomas looked at the teacher. Mrs. Lang smiled and said, "We'd love to have you every week." After class, he sat on a bench outside the school. He looked at the sky. He felt light, almost like a young man. He did not feel tired. He felt full. That evening, Linda made a special dinner, spaghetti with garlic bread. She said, "We heard you were amazing." I added, "Mrs. Lang wants you to run a weekly history club." Thomas smiled. "I thought I was done with work, but maybe this is not work. This is joy." The next weekend, something beautiful happened. The town planned a small surprise. They invited him to the community park. Children and adults gathered. In the center, a little girl stood holding a card. She gave it to Mr. Thomas. It said, "Thank you for teaching us how to be brave." Behind her, a board was covered with small notes from students. Each note had a message. "You made me love history. I want to be strong like you. My grandpa cried when you spoke. I feel less alone now. I want to teach too." Thomas read each one slowly, his eyes filled with tears. He was not embarrassed. He let the tears come. I put a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't just find a second journey," I said. "You gave one to others." He nodded. He looked around at the faces, the lights, the simple beauty of it all. And inside his heart, he whispered, "I'm not just living again. I'm helping others begin." The wind moved softly. The sun was going down. And Thomas stood tall, not as an old man, but as a light in many lives. Thomas had found a rhythm in his new life. Every day had a soft meaning. On Mondays, he helped Linda with the garden. On Tuesdays, he went to the school. On Fridays, he read with children at the community center. People knew him now, not just as a retired teacher, but as someone who listened, someone who gave peace. His steps were slower, but his heart was full. One cloudy afternoon, he decided to stop at the town cafe. He liked the corner seat near the window. From there, he could see the ocean, people walking, and children playing. He walked in and smiled at Maya behind the counter. "The usual?" she asked. "Yes, please," he said. He found his seat, placed his book on the table, and looked out. The clouds were heavy, but beautiful. Just then, the bell on the cafe door rang. He didn't look up, but then something made him turn. A man had walked in, tall, thin, with gray hair and tired shoulders. He wore a long coat and looked around as if searching. Thomas froze, his eyes locked on the man's face. It was Robert, his younger brother. Time stopped for him. His heart beat faster. He hadn't seen Robert in 20 years. Not since the day he disappeared with their shared inheritance. Money their parents had left them both. Thomas had waited for a call, a letter, an apology. Nothing ever came. Years passed. He buried the pain and closed the door to that chapter. But now Robert was there, just 20 feet away, looking older, looking uncertain. Robert turned and saw him. He froze too. For a moment, neither of them moved. The cafe noise faded. All that was left was a room full of years, distance, and broken silence. Slowly, Robert walked forward. His eyes were full of something heavy. Shame, maybe fear. He stopped at my friend's table. "Thomas," he said softly. "I didn't know if I'd find you, but I had to try." Thomas did not respond. His hands were still. His eyes didn't blink. His heart felt like it was carrying stones. Robert sat down slowly. "I know you have every reason to hate me," he said. "I was young. I was stupid. I was scared. I made the worst mistake of my life." He looked down at his shaking hands. "I took the money. I ran. I thought I would make something big, a business, a name. I failed, and I was too ashamed to come back. For years I thought about writing. But what do you write after you break someone's trust?" Thomas was silent, but inside, memories were rising like waves. The day he found the bank account empty. The day he sat stunned. The nights he cried alone. The years he worked extra hours just to survive. The anger, disappointment, and silence. He finally spoke. His voice was slow, firm, and deep. "You broke something in me, Robert. I trusted you. You were my brother. You didn't just take money. You took my peace." Robert nodded. "I know. I live with it every day." They sat in silence. The cafe moved around them, but their world was still. Thomas looked at Robert. He saw the wrinkles, the tiredness in his eyes. He was not the same boy who left. He was a man who had paid for his mistake again and again in his heart. Thomas thought of the people here, the children who looked at him with love, the letters, the hug from the little girl in the park. The evening he first spoke again after years of silence. And he thought of Margaret's words. "If I ever leave this world before you, please keep living. Don't stop walking. The world needs you." His eyes became wet. He placed his hand on the table and said, "I don't forget what you did, but I'm tired of carrying it, and I think you are too." Robert nodded again. His lips trembled. "Yes," Thomas whispered. "Then let's begin again. Not as the same people, but as two brothers who lost too much already." Robert's tears fell freely now. He covered his face. Thomas didn't cry, but his heart felt light, like a window had opened after years of darkness. They walked together out of the cafe, not with joy, but with something better, truth and a chance. That night, Thomas sat by the ocean with a notebook. He wrote slowly, "Some storms do not come to destroy us. Some come to clean the air." The wind moved across the beach. The waves kept rising, falling, rising again, just like life. And Thomas, for the first time in decades, had his brother walking beside him again. Thomas had now lived in the small California town for over a year. Time passed gently, like the soft waves of the ocean near our house. But he did not count the days anymore. He counted moments. Moments of laughter, of lessons, of soft words shared between people who trusted each other. His life, once so silent and still, was now full of quiet meaning. He was not just a teacher now. He was part of the town's heart. People came to him for advice. Children ran to hug him after his class, and his name was spoken not with formality but with warmth. "Mr. Thomas said this. Mr. Thomas once told me. Mr. Thomas taught me how to be kind." He had no blood family here, yet he had more love than many people ever find in a lifetime. Every Tuesday at school, he sat in his favorite wooden chair, surrounded by students who didn't just come to study. They came to listen. They listened to his stories, yes, but more than that, they listened to his heart. He never raised his voice. He did not need to. His words were like seeds planted in young minds, growing day by day. When he spoke of history, he connected it to life. He talked about Abraham Lincoln, yes, but also about courage in everyday moments, like apologizing, like standing up for someone, like showing up when it is hard. One girl once said, "Mr. Thomas teaches us how to be good people, not just smart ones. He smiled at that. It was all he ever really wanted. Robert, his brother, had truly changed. After that day in the cafe, their relationship took slow but steady steps. Thomas didn't forget the pain of the past, but he had learned that forgiveness is not a gift to the other person. It is a gift to yourself. Robert began helping at the community center. He repaired broken chairs, painted old walls, cleaned bookshelves, and slowly earned the town's quiet respect. Most people did not know their full story. But when Thomas introduced Robert one day during a class visit as my brother, there was silence for a moment, then loud applause. It was not just a reunion. It was a healing. Two lives broken long ago had been stitched back together. Not perfectly, but truly. One cool autumn morning, Thomas woke up early and walked to the beach. The sky was painted with gold and blue. The ocean moved as it always had, gentle, endless, speaking without sound. In his hand, he carried a small wooden box. Inside it were the few things he still held close. A letter from Margaret, the first drawing a student made for him, a photo of his old classroom, and the very first thank you note he got in California. These were not just memories. They were symbols of every moment that made him human. He walked slowly to the large tree near the shore, the one that bent slightly toward the water as if bowing in peace. He sat under it, took a deep breath, and placed the box on the earth. He didn't bury it. He simply left it there, open, honest, and real. He whispered, "Someone will find this when they need it, and they'll know what love looks like." In the days that followed, the school built a small room at the back of the library. It had soft lights, low chairs, and a big open space for reading and thinking. They called it the Story Corner. At the entrance, a wooden sign read, "Every ending is the start of something else. Mr. Thomas." Inside the room were notes from students, photos from his lessons, and blank pages where children could write their own dreams. Some children wrote letters to their future selves. Others wrote to their parents, to their lost pets, or to the stars. One boy wrote, "When I grow up, I want to teach love like Mr. Thomas did." Another wrote, "He made me feel special, and I didn't even know I was." Their words were simple, but each line was like a flower blooming from the seeds he had planted. As time moved on, Thomas continued doing what he always did, showing up, listening, giving. He did not need awards. He didn't want fame. His joy was in the faces around him. He once told me, "I don't want a statue. I just want to be remembered in someone's good memory." And he was. Every child who walked through that school would carry a piece of him forever. Not in books, but in the way they spoke, in how they treated others, and how they faced the world when it felt too heavy. One evening, Thomas was sitting on the porch with a cup of warm tea. The sun was going down, and the sky looked like it was painted with fire. A little girl from the neighborhood came walking up the path. She held a book in her hand and a blanket around her shoulders. "Mr. Thomas," she said, "can I read to you today?" He smiled, placed his cup down, and said, "Yes, please do." As she read aloud, her voice soft and clear, Thomas leaned back in his chair. He closed his eyes, not because he was tired, but because his heart was full. He listened to the sound of her words, the gentle waves in the distance, and the breeze that kissed his face. He had walked a long road. He had lost much, but he had found more than he ever thought possible. And now the second journey was not ending. It had become something greater, a path for others to walk, a light for others to follow, a gift that would live forever in stories, in children's smiles, and in every quiet moment when someone needed to believe in life again. The end.